In China, all people from middle school and university are all requested to have military training. And this usually happens before our admission around the last 1 or 2 weeks of our summer vacation. So today, let's say something about military training in China. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Yoyo speaking. So, if you see the globe, actually, military training or service is not a new thing. According to my research, the first country is Israel, because all citizens in this country are requested to complete their military service, mainly because of their environment, the surrounding countries. And second is that South Korea military service is also a must for all men. Maybe many of you didn't know, actually, the North and South Korea, these two parts, they just signed a contract saying that the war was paused, but they never announced the war ended. So actually, these two countries are still fighting against each other in their stupid mind. A joke. I love Korean people and their culture. And third is China. Yes, just like I mentioned just now. So students from university and middle schools are requested to complete such a task. Before 1980s, China and North Korea, these two countries are quite similar with each other because almost all the people all the time were involved into political movements. So before I was born, actually everyone in China was a soldier. Not a formal soldier, but everyone was fighting against each other to complete their political dreams or their political tasks. That's why for all the people, military service is not something new. So people would not be surprised about that. But after 1980s, actually the government have written military service or training into the law, which means that all people were requested to have military training as long as you're a Chinese citizen. The first reason is the inner pressure. So because of our reform and opening, many people were requesting to have democracy as well as fair laws. So the death of Hu Yaobang even caused the 1989, Tiananmen Square issue. That's why they think that if they do not have any tools to control us, then the society will be a time bomb. So you will never know when it will explode. So under the pressure, dictators were really afraid of the society losing control. That's why a law for military training is a must. Because when having military training, all the students will be politically correct. Because every day we're eating together, eating the same food, doing the same thing, and our sleeping and getting up time, these will also be the same. That's why collectivism will be strengthened and individualism will be killed. For dictators, if a society lacks diversity and different personality, then it's a safe society for them. That's why military training from that time on, as long as a person is attending school, then it's a must. And without that, we cannot graduate. The second reason is the outside reason, or you can say the outside environment. At that time, China and the Soviet Union, these two countries were fighting against each other. It was not a hot war, but it was a cold war. So the relationship between these two countries were really bad. So China, the government didn't know when there will be a war between these two places. That's why asking everybody to get ready for a possible war in the future is a must. So people will gather together. People from companies, from universities, and from middle schools were requested to have army training or military training. So during the training, all the people will be sent to a camp, and there people will do different things, but mostly would be jogging, running, walking, or standing in queues. Very boring, though it could not be too tiring or too exhausting, but nothing to do. Every day you were repeating the same stuff, and you have to show to the government and the country that you are a honesty and also a person with enough faith. So I remember around 1990. So many universities like Tsinghua and Peking University, famous universities, they wanted to show how faithful they are. So they organized a military training and they sent people there for almost a whole year. Every day, students will be trained for over 10 hours. And even if when they are resting, they still needed to write something to show that they are faithful enough. But luckily, after 1995, the requested was a lot lower compared to the past. People were asked to do 1 or 2 weeks training, and that's it. In China, as many people were born between 1960s and 1970s, that's why there are also many newborn babies around 1990s. That's why there are many schools, they found that training camps were not enough to hold their students. So about 10 years ago, you will see in China, actually, there were so many military training outsourcing companies. These companies will collect money from schools or universities first, then send the students to a camp. But that is a fake camp. Actually, it's not a complete place. First is that they do not have real soldiers. They only have people who served the army before, but now already left. And many of these places didn't even have enough facilities. Some people, how would you say that, the people who left the army, they are weird and bad people. Some people will touch the body of female students, but female students, they are not bold enough to say that. And some of them told their parents or their school after training, but because they do not have any evidence and they sit too long after the training, so it's really hard for the police to invest. And around August 2025, in Shanghai, there was a student who died because of the heat, and that place, the so-called camp, didn't have the first aid facilities for that student, and now their parents are suffering from the sad. Of course, just like I said before, the training would not be free. Usually, the school will ask students to give money. They collect the money. They usually will spend half of the money to the outsourcing company or the camp, and the rest will be kept by the school. So the fee will never be transparent. And of course, parents and students, because they chose the school, of course, they will trust the school. So how about the suggestions or the thoughts from parents? Many parents, just like us, because we were brainwashed since very young age, that's why we would think schools and the government, they will always be correct. So the school will tell parents, before the admission, if you send your students to the training camp, then he can do some exercises and your kids can also change the schedule to fit the new semester schedule. For me, it's quite ridiculous because if the training is just 1 or 2 weeks, for some people, it's not long enough to change their schedule because their biological clock inside the body needs at least 1 or 2 months to fully fit the new semester schedule. And most importantly, students will have to suffer under the sun because of the heat, because of the exhaustion. It's very easy to have sickness for the young kids. And also, because they only have around 2 months for their summer vacation, and now 1 or 2 weeks will be taken by the training camp. That's so cruel. So maybe some of you will ask, did you have any military training before? Yes, because I attended middle school and I attended university as well. For middle school, at that time, I remembered because I was sick. That's why I escaped. And the school didn't trouble me. They just asked me, are you really sick? And they called my parents. And they said, yes, I was sick. So I luckily escaped 10 days. I have 10 days more summer vacation compared to other kids. But in university, I didn't escape. At that time, we were lucky because we were not sent to a camp. We can have the military training in our campus. So we live in our dormitory and we can choose what we want to eat in our dining halls. And at that time, I remember because we didn't do that during summer vacation before admission, that's why the school only trained us 4 or 5 days before our winter vacation began. So between the first and the second semester. And I remember there were at least 2 days and a half the weather was not good. It was raining, so the training was simple and I didn't feel any exhaustion. So that's all for my sharing for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's topic. If you have anything you want to know about China or about Hong Kong, just let me know. I will see you again very soon in my next episode.